And we are live back again on Thursday afternoon, May 1st. We have Ledge Council back in the seat, and there's an entire section in the C bill that's come back from the Senate, as well as apparently a bill that was on our wall, on the House Transportation wall from 2 years ago. And there is a bill that's being discussed in the Senate, and a whole bunch of other pieces around legal trails. And since there's a lot of talk, what I'd like to do is make sure the committee's educated from our Ledge Council, at least to start, so that we have some background on it as all of those things swirl around. And so that's what this next.
Got 15 minutes?
15 minutes, yep.
All right.
Or less, if it takes less. Go ahead.
Great. So for the record, I'm Damon Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. Seems like my audience goes down as the day goes on. I don't know if that's a comment on my excitement. So let's start with what is a legal trail. I think that's probably the best place to start. So I'm going to pull up the statute here for you really quickly. So you're probably all very familiar with class 1, 2, 3, and 4 town highways. As you can see here with the definitions, town highways are all of those class 1, 2, 3, and 4 highways that towns have authority to exclusively or cooperatively maintain, or that are maintained by the towns except for scheduled surface maintenance performed by the agency pursuant to section 306A. Trail is a public right-of-way that is not a highway. And it's important to note that in Title 19, legal trail appears only once, but throughout the title we refer to, or in the few instances where it appears, we refer to trails. And when we're talking about legal trails, when it says trail, it means legal trail. So this is different than a trail that you may grant permission to. So for example, if you have 50 acres and you grant permission to VAST or VASA to cross your land, that is different from a legal trail. So legal trail was at one time class 4 highway in a town. And the highway was discontinued, the public right-of-way remained, and it became classified as a trail. We have had trail classification in our statutes for over 100 years. And the question that is before you, there are two pieces in a bill called S4, which were in another bill that was in this committee last year, for those of you who are here. One is around the question of expressly stating that towns may maintain the trail. And as you've all heard, there is litigation ongoing related to some trails in Tunbridge. In that case, the town argues that it has the authority to maintain the trails. The landowners argue that that authority does not exist in statute. We could spend a long time discussing the legal argument there. Because I am now under 15 minutes left on the amount of time I have to talk, I'm not going to go into it too deeply. But that's basically the question. So S4 would explicitly state that towns have the authority to maintain trails. Depending on which side prevails in that case, that would either be a clarification of the existing law, or it would be granting a right to towns that if the landowners are correct in that case and the court rules with them, their argument is essentially that when we recodified Title 19 in 1986, legal trails used to be lumped in with class 4 roads with the same maintenance language. They were separated out. And as you can see on the language in front of you, there is no statement about maintenance of legal trails. So the towns argue that it's implied that if you have a right of way, you should have the right to maintain it. The landowner is arguing that when the legislature made the choice to separate them out and not explicitly state that you have the right to maintain it, that was an intentional choice at the time in light of certain fiscal realities that were being faced by towns to take away that right, and at which point the right would be relinquished to the underlying landowner. So, so that's kind of the core issue. What's in H488 is just the maintenance language. The other piece of S4 is language around determining the uses of legal trails. And as I understand the litigation, the right of municipalities to determine the uses is not really being disputed. When you really get deep into the takings question, there's a question of whether changing uses can overburden a right of way in comparison to history and then have an impact on the underlying and neighboring land in a manner that would constitute a taking. For our purposes, what we're really looking at here is if you think of a right of way, in most instances, a public right of way is an easement that is over the land of the underlying landowner. And so public rights of way in Vermont are typically 3 rods wide. Everybody knows how wide that is, right?
3 times 16
and a half.
Yeah, 49 and a half feet wide. So there we go. Yeah. I don't remember how many chain that is, but there was actually a case where a town laid it out in rods and they were supposed to lay it out in chains. And that went up to the Supreme Court. I forget when, but a dispute over whether the right of way was correct. Anyway, I digress. So the public right of way is this 49 and a half foot wide easement over the land of the underlying landowner.
What? 49 feet?
49 and a half feet, which is 3 rods. So 16 and a half times 3.
Most of your town roads are 3 rods.
Yeah. So that's the standard easement width, unless it's otherwise described. So in some cases, you'll see that the easement was only 2 rods, let's say, something like that. And that then if the town wanted to widen it, they would actually have to go through the condemnation process, eminent domain, condemn that land and pay compensation to the landowner to acquire it. When they acquire these easements, they acquire the right for the public to travel over it and for the town to build a roadway and to maintain that roadway. Think of this as sort of a bundle of rights that they've acquired for that easement. So if it's just the easement and they haven't acquired the land itself underneath it, which in most cases, my understanding is that they have not, although it is conceivable that the town just buys the land or that it's over land that the town already owned and they later sold off the land to the sides of the road. In most cases, it's just an easement over someone's land. And the town now has the right to build its roadway along that easement. And then there are other incidental things like sidewalks and utility poles that can be placed in the easement. And then maintenance can be conducted typically. That's all part of the property rights that are acquired when they condemned and basically purchased that easement from the landowner. The issue in our case, and in the litigation that's underlying this, is if the legislature took away the right to maintain, what happens when you extinguish one of these public rights of way or a portion of it is that those property rights that the public entity used to own, the municipality, go back to the underlying landowner.
Can you repeat that plus, please?
So when you relinquish a public right of way or a portion of it, what happens is the property rights that the public entity, in this case, the municipality owned, revert back to the underlying landowners, or if it straddles the property line between 2 properties, they're split between the landowners on either side. So the question that's at issue in the Tunbridge case, and which relates directly to the language that's in the T-bill from the Senate, is this question of whether municipalities have retained the right to maintain legal trails, or whether that right, when Title 19 was recodified and the maintenance language that went with legal trails no longer had clear maintenance language, whether that right to maintain the legal trail was intentionally relinquished to the underlying landowners. Does that make sense? So this is something that the court's going to have to decide, but it does impact sort of the potential consequences of the underlying language. And so if we've relinquished that in order to get it back, in under both the Vermont and the US constitutions, you can't take private property without paying compensation for it. And the Vermont Constitution also expressly states that there needs to be a necessity or public need for the taking. So you have to go through, that's what the condemnation process is for. So eminent domain provides a process where if a town wants to lay out a road, they would lay out where it's going to go. They would offer compensation to the underlying landowners. The underlying landowners can accept that compensation if they think it's reasonable, or they can say that's not reasonable, and then it goes through a process where independently appointed panel basically determines what appropriate compensation is. And this prevents the public entity from running roughshod over private property owners. So those cases can be, particularly when it's voluntary and it's sure, that sounds like a reasonable amount. That can be very quick. If there's a dispute, it can take quite a lot of time with competing assessments of value and time to consider the underlying law and so forth. But the reason why this is important with the maintenance language is if the court rules in favor of the municipality and the language in the T-bill is just a clarification of the existing law, then there's no issue. However, if the court rules in favor of the landowner and finds that the legislature gave up the right for municipalities to maintain legal trails throughout the state when it updated Title 19 in 1986, it means that municipalities would need to now go through a condemnation proceeding to reacquire that right, or to basically they have to pay compensation to landowners for that right. The potential complication here is that the language in H488 would essentially have granted that right already, which means that if the landowner wins, and I'm not the court, I cannot tell you what the outcome is going to be. I think both sides have made compelling arguments. I think that there is a reasonable potential that both sides could prevail on some or all of their arguments. So if the landowner does prevail in this case, what it would mean is that we would have granted a right without paying compensation, which is a taking without compensation, which would be a constitutional violation. So that doesn't mean that these have happened in the past. What it means is we have to go back and pay compensation for all 500 some odd miles in the state. So, and that basically, it just puts the potential there that if the landowner prevails and the language that's in the T-bill currently is passed, then there's potential that you have to pay compensation for all those miles of trails. And I don't know what the value of a maintenance right is, and it may be different from trail to trail. And I can't give you an estimate of what that cost would be. But there is the potential that if the case goes in that direction, that the language would result in the state or the municipalities are both having to come up with the money to pay that compensation. If the case goes in in favor of the town, then the right already existed for the town and there's no need to pay compensation because you can't take something that you already own. So that is the high level view. There's a lot more detail in there, but that's sort of, I'm up against the limit of my time. So that's sort of the high level overview of what's there.
Two questions that I think are still high level. One is, you said 500 something miles. Is that how many trail easements?
So that's the miles of legal trails.
Okay, of legal trails.
There is an
Okay.
inventory.
There is an inventory of those. They're on all the town highway maps.
Yeah.
So
Then my next question is, why is this piece in there? Is this in response to that challenge? I mean, why are we putting that in there this year? We did
So-
last year.
I can't speak for the members. My understanding though is that this is related to this question of who has authority. And, I think I would defer to the advocates on both sides, but my understanding is that this is related to that case and that broader question and the desire to clarify that right. Obviously, the language here would give or clarify the right of towns to maintain legal trails. And so Senator White and the Senate committee felt very strongly, and the committee agreed with her and added this language. And so that's, and there's a bill S4 on the wall in the Senate, which they did not move, which includes the language that you have in this bill, as well as an additional section relating to the determining the uses of trails. And that section, there's already language in Title 19 that relates to towns determining the uses, and that really was adding language in Title 24, allowing for an ordinance relating to uses so that you could then enforce those uses under your ordinance authority. So that's really a municipal governance thing.
So the initial process, I mean, when land was converted from a class 4 road to a trail, if it were eminent, I mean, if the land were originally taken by eminent domain, then there's not really a question, right? That's still.
So yeah, the class 4 roads are public rights of way that were laid out and condemned by the municipality, or they were granted to the municipality through another process where.
But that's my question. Like, if it's an easement, I kind of understand why there's some confusion about whose land it is.
Usually what the
But
town
eminent
acquires.
domain isn't that state or municipality property?
So this is where things get confusing. Usually what the municipality acquires, in my understanding, is the least expensive right that will grant it what it needs, which is an easement for the right of way. It is possible to have what's known as a fee simple interest, which is owning everything, just buying the land outright. In some cases, that's happened when the value of the easement and the land are so close that it doesn't make sense to acquire one or the other. Or in some cases, it's happened where the town owned the land underlying where it laid out a portion of the right of way, and then it sold off the rest, or transferred the rest away.
But your assumption is that most of the.
My assumption is that most of these legal trails are lying on easements, and I have nothing to indicate otherwise. But it is entirely possible that some of them are owned in fee simple and there wouldn't be compensation, but I have no inventory And I certainly have not gone to all the towns that have legal trails to go back through the deed history. But my understanding would be that most of these would be easements that were granted at some time in the past as the town was laying out its roadways. And I mean, oftentimes when you're granting that public right of way, it's because you want to build a house on your land and you want to make sure that you have access to it from it to, the village center. And so you would grant these easements and reach an accommodation with the town and they'd lay out the road. But as time went on, some of these became difficult to maintain or were less used, we are all familiar with municipalities where the hilltop farms disappeared and the need for some of these roads went away. So there are a variety of instances where the town would, see fit to downgrade it from a town highway to a legal trail. One other nuance that's worth laying out is that some of these legal trails also access state lands. And so there is provision in Title 19 that allows the Commissioner of Forest Parks and Rec when a town is discontinuing a Class 4 road that accesses state forest land or state park land to request that it be converted to a legal trail to maintain access for maintenance or whatever purpose the state needs. Sometimes it's recreation, sometimes it's maintenance. But that's just another facet of this. The core issue is that issue of who holds the right to maintenance, which is before the court. It's in the Superior Court right now. The parties have filed cross motions for summary judgment, and the court is considering the issue right now. So hopefully there's a court decision forthcoming at some point. And we'll have an answer from the court's interpretation, which would clarify the issue of whether or not there's a taking that would be caused by this language. I don't know if the parties would, take it to the Supreme Court after that, or they'd settle with the Superior Court ruling. That's up to them. And, I can't speak for the parties. And you received written material from the landowner. And I think the league mentioned this case when they were in here on another issue the other day. So you've heard a little bit about it, and I know there's been discussion in the building and in the press, et cetera. So
Okay.
I'm happy to come back and talk more when you're not at the end of your workday. So
Thank you very much. We need to return, well, we're still sort of on H 488. I guess maybe our vice chair is better outlining the issues, but we obviously just got a pretty significant preview of the amount of changes that more than double the numbers, almost double the number of sections and length of the T-bill. Maybe not as many financial changes, but certainly as many policy changes. We have sort of the option of trying to take the testimony and offer a counter
Further proposal.
of amendment back to the Senate, or to accept it all as is if we're 100% in agreement with everything they put in there, or to request a committee of conference are our three options at this point. We want to accept everything that they did to the T-bill.
Go hands.
Does anybody want, do we want to try to put together a further proposal of amendment?
Yeah.
And send a whole new or another amended version back, or we go to a committee of conference? And that's what we have to decide as a committee. I think that there's been a pretty significant amount of change to the T-bill.
Yeah.
And we know that the budget has already passed the Senate and has entered into committee of conference with the House. The T-bill is a pretty significant portion of that budget, and the miscellaneous DMV bill is financially anyway a much smaller piece of that. And the timing of those is not yet fully determined, but on the T-bill, timing is sort of next.
What does the committee of conference look like? Is it
It's
our full committees or is it a subset of the committee?
my understanding, again, first time out for me, the speaker would assign 3 members of the House and the Senate would assign 3 members of the Senate, and they would then negotiate an agreement on what the final version of the bill would be.
And it's not always,
Agreements and white smoke comes out.
Yeah.
I think, and then what comes out gets voted on, the House and the
It's either
Senate,
up or down.
just up or down,
That's right.
right?
yeah, it's an all or nothing vote.
Yeah.
There's no amending a conference report. The 3 members from each body are not necessarily all members of the committee. So I've been on conference committees where it's 2 members of the policy committee and then a member of a money committee. But that is up to the speaker and the committee on committees in the Senate. But yeah, there is, even if you're not appointed to the conference committee, there is opportunity. Oftentimes members of the committee, if they're interested, will come in and watch, and certainly talk with their side as the negotiations continue on. But usually it's a back and forth. And then when we're waiting on something like the budget, there may be a back and forth with things that are held off until you're ready to finalize another bill that it depends on. So.
No, I think conference committee seems to be the best approach. Only because we don't have time to take testimony. Understand the differences. I mean, some of the things probably say, yeah, that's fine. But there seem to be other things that we're not quite sure about. Then if we were to meet then, and then they have to go back to the House and Senate, so. That would destroy my poll, my
Your wager.
my wager on when we're leaving.
That a motion to go to the conference
That
committee?
is a motion to go to conference.
Anybody have any comments? I guess, do we take a straw poll at this point?
No, you need an actually official vote.
We need an official
I believe.
vote.
Do you need position of the
Actually,
section?
no, it is a straw poll because we don't have, yeah, you're right.
We don't
It's
have
late in the
possession.
day. We don't have possession, so it is a straw poll.
Yeah.
But you still will need to have the straw poll announced on for you. But so it is a straw poll.
Okay. All those in favor of going to conference committee? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed? We have to vote?
Yeah, yeah, if you're sitting there.
You're gonna have to vote one way or another.
I don't care, one way or the other.
Well,
Put me wherever you want.
It's unanimous.
There you go.
all right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I will see you tomorrow. I think you've got me again. But
Catch you again tomorrow for
After before.
after
Um,
we're here, and then while you're
oh, yeah.
the piece.
oh, that's great. You guys are doing motor vehicle stuff.
Well, potential addition to the motor vehicle bill,
Oh,
and
after the floor tomorrow,
you're not up on right off. There's other things before then. Yes,
yeah, okay.
you would only have to come back if we can. So I also might as well throw this up real quick. We are going, we've already gotten an amendment to our DMV bill that's coming from a member of the House. So I have an amendment. It's related to inspections. The brief real quick is to go to an every other year and to change the fee. So it's an every other year fee neutral, but change inspections from annual to biannual. And Representative Noyes is going to be offering an amendment to the DMV bill. We will have to fit a time in to hear him. We also have multiple members out tomorrow, and since we really only guaranteed two votes a year, and sometimes more, possibly more this year, but I'm not sure that we're gonna be able to get a vote on this bill
Yeah,
tomorrow.
then I guess I just procedure, I don't know how that's an amendment, it's voted out.
There's not a bill yet, so that's
I don't know how
not a
you
question.
question.
Well, he mentioned it because there is a possible vote listed on our piece for tomorrow.
He might have a suggestion, but it's not really an amendment. Amendment doesn't come until the bill's on the floor of the House and then you're amending.
So we'll have a timing issue to look at. let's just say that
Maybe not
piece is
tomorrow.
potentially coming.